going to tell us stuff.
So he gave you the name.
They didn't know exactly publicize it. Like, had I not seen
Mr. Rupert and a couple of residents of Harvard, and that would be it. This is a little bit not what I anticipated, didn't anticipate any media. But let me just tell you how we came to be here, how I came to be here. I guess, Lois, you called me about 2 weeks ago on a Saturday, and Lois is also a neighbor. I'll say that, very nice person. And asked me questions about this site, many of which I did not know the answers to. And then we started to interact. Terry started. I've been in Harrisburg doing stuff like, property tax reform and things like that. So it was sort of tied down there. And Terry's been dealing with. Terry Wisniewski's my chief of staff, and we'll introduce everybody in just a second once I get done. And just sort of, and then that screaming headline in the Daily Times appeared, and I thought there just seems to be a disconnect between the magnitude of the problem, as I've been hearing it from Mr. Rupert and Terry and others, and the media coverage. So, but nevertheless, tests were done. A report was here, and I know because of the media coverage and just because of the smell and all that, there's a lot of concern. So I wanted to make sure that everyone who was interested had sort of full information, had an opportunity to answer their questions, and then I was up to speed on the issue. So I really set this meeting up to bring myself up to speed and to make sure neighbors' questions were answered. So having said that, I think what we'll do next is have all the official people introduce themselves and state their title, and then we'll perhaps Mr. Rupert and someone from the DEP might just sort of give some assessment of what the problem is, what potential solutions are, and then we'll just open it up to questions. How's that sound? Does that work for everybody? Okay, so having said that, let's just start by introducing Greg Vitali, state representative for this district. Let's just sort of go around, and anybody who has any sort of, just introduce yourself and your title and so forth.
Cosmos Servideo, Regional Director for DEP.
I'm Tom Canajani. I am the Water Quality Special Supervisor of the Storage Tank Program for DEP.
I'm Rebecca Flannery. I'm a geologic specialist with the DEP.
My name is Rich Rupert. I'm an on-scene coordinator with Region 3 EPA.
Terry, you?
Terry Wisniewski, Greg Vitali's chief of staff.
Hi, Mike Nines, environmental engineering consultant.
Hi, Sasha Brown. I'm the Pennsylvania State Progression Liaison at the EPA.
Okay, does anyone else want to introduce themselves?
Dave Freed, 548 Washington. I'm a neighbor.
Okay.
Greg, is there a representative from the entity that owns the land here?
I'm not sure, but let's finish the introductions and then we'll. Okay, so go
I
ahead.
think that would be an important introduction, Greg.
Well, we'll get to that right after we get to the introductions. Go ahead.
Gene Wazorek. I live at 544, which is the red awning. I'm closest to the site.
Okay.
I'm Tom Booth, 540.
Right.
30 feet from the oil. It's there.
That's over 564.
Okay, Mr. Bove, I went to school with your.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I went to your. Yeah, and Anybody else want to introduce?
All right, so nice to see you.
Right, I'm saying.
I'm Joanne Simmons, 552 Washington.
Okay.
Hi, Bryce Walkerhauser, 120 Harvard.
Oh, Mary's husband. Yeah.
Aaron Smith, 101 Harvard.
Right. Okay.
Greg, I'm Tom Bielli from 688 Washington.
Great. Thank you for coming. Anybody else?
No. Dr. Bart Kosman, host of the Haverford 7 show.
Excellent. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Now, having said that, now just to deal with your question, so it does not appear. Now, first of all, does anyone know who the owner is? Terry, do we know who the owner is?
I believe it's
Yeah, it's Harvard 7 LLC.
Okay, that's the owner, and that is there a representative of that person here today?
I'm standing in. I'm Mike Nines, environmental engineering
I think one
consultant.
of them's coming right
Here to.
Oh yeah, that's Jeff Steiger.
Are you a member of the
Come on, Jeff.
No.
We're
Are any members of the LLC?
I think coming right now.
You're a consultant. We're LLC.
okay. So what we're going to do? What we're going to do now, Jeff? Why don't you just quickly introduce yourself? We're introducing everybody. I met Jeff outdoor knocking yesterday for the first time.
So I'm Jeff Steigerwalt, the former owner.
Okay. Having said that, what we're going to do, and we're going to try to kind of keep this in an orderly fashion. I think believe me, I'm not leaving here till everybody's questions are answered. So don't have that fear. But what I kind of want to do it in an orderly way. I want EPA, DEP, and anybody officially who wants to sort of give an explanation, give it, and then we'll open it up for questions. And believe me, we're going to stay here. I'm going to stay here till they're all answered. But let's go ahead. So Jeff, why don't you start? I mean, Mr. Rupert. Whoever's Mr. Rupert, why don't you start?
Remember my name.
Okay.
So, I guess EPA's involvement in this particular location started probably about the 29th of December 2014. We got a call from a couple of residents explaining that there was this really strong, overpowering odor. After talking to them a little bit, it was described as petroleum, and I spoke with the township and the owner, one of the project managers who was out here doing the construction, and kind of identified it as a petroleum odor, which subsided as soon as the construction stopped, being it was December and it was cold. And I'd given my contact information to the residents that I talked to. I said, when they start digging again in the spring, if there's any problems, give me a shout. About 2-3 weeks ago, another part of EPA was out here for the PCP site, the Superfund site that's up here, and they said that they smelled a lot of petroleum. So I got back in touch with the people that I'd been talking to, came out, met them the next morning, saw there was construction activity going on at the site, came on the site, spoke with some of the workers, contacted the owner, and they allowed me to go in and collect samples of the oil that's coming into the bottom of the excavation. There's water, they're down about 5-6 feet. There's some water coming in, and on top of the water there's a coating of oil, and it was very fragrant. Since that time, it's volatile. It kind of degrades and the smells down to just sort of an old petroleum smell. We sampled oil, water, and soil, and we found that the oil was identified as a degraded petroleum or home heating oil, kerosene, or lubricating oil, probably a combination of both. We found no PCP. That was one of the concerns that I had, being its proximity to the recreational open space here, which was contaminated with PCP and was remediated. We found no industrial solvents. That's something I always look for because you see them everywhere. PCE, TCE, those kinds of things. And that's basically what we found, and we found nothing in the oil of concern. At that point, we're in touch with DEP. This is a situation that fits perfectly into their program. EPA doesn't really address things of this nature. So then we passed it to DEP, and pretty much our involvement at this point is complete.
Did you mention the tests were done?
Yes, sir.
And so
we have the analytical report. It's 10,000 pages long.
Yeah.
It's being validated for a second time by EPA chemists, and right now, because the property issues, we're in conversations with the property owner to see about getting it released, and I anticipate that that'll be resolved in the next couple days.
Okay. Well, hold on just a second. Let's just hold just a second. I just want to kind of now. Okay, we're gonna answer. You'll be the first person whose question we're gonna take. Okay. Now, who wants to should give the DEP's presentation here?
I can do it.
Okay.
The department we've had a history with the property over the years. When it was the McCandless fuel facility, property was historically it was an asphalt plant. Then it was converted over at some point into an underground storage. They had underground storage tanks where they contained heating oil, and then they distributed heating oil. In about 1998-99, those underground storage tanks were removed. I believe the above ground tanks that were used for the asphalt plant, they were removed in, I think, 95, somewhere around that time frame. Those tanks were removed. At the time that the underground storage tanks were removed, there was contamination. They were steel tanks that were in the ground for a number of years. The property owner at the time went through the process, hired a consulting firm. They came in, they did characterization work, they did sampling, and they met standards at the time in, I think it was 2002.
Yes.
They provided, sampling analytical to the department, and at that time the department closed the case out based on the information that they had at that time. So at that point the site was closed out on the department's end until we were contacted by EPA.
when this came, that this contamination was identified in the back corner of the property. So now at this point, we're looking at all the information again, coming back up to speed with things, meeting with everybody, and working with the property owner to basically have this addressed. They're going to work through our corrective action process, which is a very well laid out process that gives the property owner a step-by-step approach on how to address the contamination that was identified. And like I said, we were in touch with him yesterday, and Rebecca's our project geologist who will be the case manager for the department, and she'll work with the property owner and his consultants to basically address what was found. So this is kind of what we do every day. So we're here to work with with the property owner and his consultants, and we're also here to work with the residents, because our goal is to basically protect human health and the environment. So that's why we're here.
And our commitment as we move forward to answer any of your questions, Rebecca will be giving her information. So as we move forward in our process, any other questions that you may have, please call us. We want to make sure that you have all the right information, everything that we're seeing day to day. And again, we're committed with EPA as well as with the property owner to address the situation and rectify it immediately.
Now, before we open up to questions, anybody with health want to present information about the status of the site? Any?
I think Tom said it all.
Okay, good. Okay, so then now we'll just open up the question. Did you have a question?
So what specific compounds were with
Well, we sampled something called the gas organic range, GRO, ORO, and it's basically, it identifies all the petroleum-related compounds. We ran a very broad spectrum gas chromatograph mass spectrometer method called an 8260. It identifies a list about this long of various industrial chlorinated solvents, pretty much all the industrial chemicals. We ran for polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs. You guys probably have heard that term before. We ran total petroleum hydrocarbon, and we ran an analysis that would find the pentachlorophenols, the longer chain chlorinated compounds. We found extremely low levels of PCBs in the water, in the soil, but not in the oil. When I say really low, I'm talking fractions of parts per billion. Okay, and usually below 1 part, generally speaking, below 1 part per million, it's not regulated. So this is 1,000 times less than that. But we find PCBs, I bet you if I pulled 20 samples on this block, 75% of them will probably come back positive at very, very low levels. It's just everywhere. But we found nothing in the samples that present any kind of immediate risk.
Did you say you did do SVOCs?
Yes, that's the 8260 or 8270.
Okay, and that's the complete profile?
Yeah, that's what a pentachlorophenols would probably be.
exposed waste that's there now? I mean, what, it's 10 days since the footing's been dug. Everything's exposed, there's pipes. What, is that hurting myself and my neighbors? Breathing stuff like that, and it comes up over the berm in my windows. I mean, what is that doing to me long term and now?
I'm not a toxicologist, but you know, we came out here with an instrument called an organic vapor analyzer.
For the one day, but how about the last 10 days?
Well, the first day would have been the worst. Okay, that's when the oil first comes into the excavation and it's most volatile.
The smell hasn't changed.
Yes, it has. It has changed significantly.
You're not here living with it. You're not here
You're right,
every day.
but I've been here half dozen times since that time. I was out there today. I was out there yesterday, and I know what it smells like now.
Different
And I know.
temperatures. The hotter it gets, the more exposed.
Sir, I was out here when it was very hot in the last couple of days. Okay, and first day we were out here, and I took the samples, and I stood there with our contractors. When I went home that night, I had a headache from standing right next to it. Okay,
That's what I get every day now.
well. I don't smell it the same. I'm sorry. I'm not here all the time.
It's winding across all these homes right down here. The wind's going over the berm. It's been exposed now. Nobody's made any attempt to dry the stuff that's in the footing now. Put some tubes and something to absorb it. And
I can back that up. I live about 4 houses down, and my girlfriend and I have felt sick over the past 2 or 3 weeks.
Nobody's made any attempt to dry it up. It's just laying there and permeating the air. Why can't it be dried up? 10 days. Nobody's been there to do it. They look at it, they walk away.
Yeah,
Those socks are going in the ground.
what we can do is we can ask the landowner to put a boom on it or to pull it up. What we wanted to see was how much oil would come into the excavation, get some assessment of how much there's there. No new stuff has come in that we've seen. And again, we went over it with the organic vapor analyzer. We didn't see anything of any consequence, which is one reason we didn't take any further action.
There's
Yes,
also
sir.
more in the court there. You took the court out that day.
No, we
There's
didn't take the
more.
court out that day. I'm not going to argue with you, sir.
Okay.
I've been doing this for a long time. There's less than a 32nd of an inch on the surface.
With the organic vaporizer,
Analyze.
does this be more of an indication as far as what chemicals are being released?
Yeah, it gives you. Yes.
Everybody breathes different. Everybody gets sinus issues.
Right.
That
Everybody
all
has
affects
different sensitivities. Yeah, but this
So I don't know
is
that
a
it
very
really
scientific
really
measure of what's
accurate.
there, and we didn't find very much. But I'm not. I know you can smell oil. I mean, I've been on lots of sites like this where you smell oil forever. Just that old oil smell. But typically, it's not something that's associated with any kind of
No
immediate
lung
or chronic.
cancers, no environmental health risk at all from breathing that in?
Not to my knowledge. I'm not a toxicologist, but I can tell you from working with it, typically the things that cause the cancers are the volatile organic compounds, or things like, or some of the things that are in the air, as I understand it. Okay, I'm going to qualify that. Are benzenes, toluenes, the kinds of things that we're not seeing in this. There's other stuff that cause direct exposure that can cause cancers and that, but there's no direct exposure. But again,
Well, kids back and forth on the site before.
but again, I'm not a toxicologist.
There is definitely direct exposure with people.
Well,
There's been kids back and forth on here on railroad tracks for years.
but the stuff that they're coming in contact with is not a lot different than if you change oil on your lawnmower or you put gas in your lawnmower. Okay, it's not significantly different than that.
But how often do children do that?
I don't know. When I was a child, I was messing around with motors all the time. And every time this was a long time ago, things were different. When we got paint on our hands, we used gas to take it off. Maybe I wasn't the smartest kid on the block. I don't know.
I'm sorry if you already answered this. I just two quick questions. Was the PAH suite run?
Yeah, the PAHs are part of the gas range organics, and we didn't see any.
DRO, GRO, and PAHs, you had it all, right?
Yeah, I have to, yes, but like I said, it's a 10,000 page report. We're still looking at it.
Gotcha. I understand.
I would be surprised if there weren't polyaromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, given that there's asphalt-like materials all over the site.
I hear you. The other question is, has the plume been completely delineated, or are you working on that?
That's over to the
Delineate the
DEP's
plume.
area.
With the property
Source been identified?
That's a part of what the property owner through the corrective action process.
So it's coming.
Yes.
And it'll be shared somehow, like interpreted maybe.
Well, yeah. I mean, once the reports are provided to the department, they are then public. It's a public record.
Right. And my office can get you anything. I mean, we work with the DEP pretty well.
And like we said, Rebecca's the case manager, so we're there to answer questions through the process. We've dealt with sites like this in the past. I mean, this isn't the first time we've come across something like this.
Once we have those reports, obviously they're open to the public. We'll share those with you. We'll work through the representative's office to again answer any other questions any of you may have.
You had a question, right?
Will they be required to open up the ground, excavate whatever's in there and get it out?
As a part of the corrective action process, they're required through our process to do source removal. So through their investigations, they would need to go on, they would identify the product, they would remove that product. So,
Because I know there's, in some of the stuff I've seen out there, I think there's been perceived animosity between us and the builder and so on. And that's not, because I almost feel for them like they were forced to inherit a problem, or not forced, but it just, I've only been here 10 years, but, we feel for the builder too, it's kind of like, is it fair that they're getting required to clean up the mess that a lot of people have known exists, so I don't know, I just wanted to be clear about there's no animosity towards anybody really. It's just more like, especially the builder, because, they're, I don't know, innocent to what's been going on, or what was there, or who knows what. I guess my point, I don't know what my point is other than, you want to be clear. Yeah, we're not blaming the people that build. It's kind of like, where was the disconnect, because I feel for them if they're actually the ones that are going to have to pay for all this.
Our feeling is we know it's there, we want it removed. I mean, that's bottom line.
And I hear you saying it's going to be
Right, that's a part of the process.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I swear it's last one.
No, you don't have to apologize. We're
You're
just
probably not here yet, but do you envision when the residents get built here, that you're going to require a vapor barrier?
That would be a part of the evaluation, that when the property owner hires, when his consulting firm gets involved with the characterization, that's a part of.
Evaluate the pathway and see if you.
Yep, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
My understanding is there are pipes there, and those pipes might be coming under the fence into my yard. How would that be handled? Since it's coming from this site.
I mean, again, a part of the process, they would have to trace those pipes back. Now, there may be, there's going to have to be, back and forth cooperation, possibly access, agreement to be able to remove those lines, because what you're going to want to see is did anything migrate along those lines and have to be removed. So,
I mean, the problem is there's been no cooperation. The previous owner, Mr. Steigerwalt, when he purchased the property, made an attempt and effort.
This is Mr. Steigerwalt,
yeah,
right
made
here.
an attempt and effort to talk to every neighbor. Mr. Schmidt told me last night that Mr. Steigerwalt personally came over and said, "Do you have a problem with me cutting down these trees?" He said no. So I appreciate Mr. Steigerwalt making the effort. He sold the property. The new owner, we don't know who they are, never heard from them. I had a problem with my addition. It's pulling away from my house. They're excavating 20 feet from my property. I spoke to Kevin, I can't remember his last name.
Hilsinger.
He had no interest. I said, come over and look at this. No, talk to your insurance company. No interest at all. I tried to call him directly. He never returned my call. He called me back because I spoke to the township. Joe Celia called him, and he called me. If there's no pressure there, I don't see any attempt by them to do anything.
Well, sir, I just assure you of one thing: they're dealing with us, and we're going to make sure that it's addressed. They're going to be working with their consultant, and they're going to be answering our questions. And again, we'll be, once they produce that report to us, we'll be working with that. All of you will have access to that as well. So, thank you.
Yeah, Jeff.
I just have a couple quick questions, because obviously I am the former owner. I tried to convey. I think we had 2 town meetings, which, if you did your research, you would have seen that we had records showing that we talked about the contamination. We came up, why different things happened. My question is, you were quoted as saying bubbling. Was there bubbling on the property, of oil
What
bubbling?
I saw when I looked down at the top of the water surface where there was no sheen yet,
Right.
little tiny bubbles that would occasionally just float
Popping up?
and pop up to the surface.
Okay, and in that, and let me ask you, and because I'm concerned too, because as everyone well knows, I'm planning on living back here.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
this hit me when I saw there were newspaper articles and different things of that nature. So my question is, right now, is there any concern other than what was already posted in the Phase 2 or what was in the 2002 DEP reports? Are all the levels the same, buildable for housing?
That EPA didn't look at that. EPA looked at the immediate threat only, the oil that's in the excavation.
And
anything after that, DEP is looking at. So they should actually answer your question.
okay, but currently right now with the testing, is there anything to be concerned about? Are the levels acceptable?
The levels of the oil that we found showed nothing. It's old oil. It's old weathered oil. That's what we found.
Okay, so would you say that that's the same that was in the Phase 2 that I completed?
With the thing, we haven't really looked at all the analytical that was provided. What we would look at is, once that data is available, to look at numbers, and then when the property owner goes in and begins to collect his samples, we would
Right.
have to then compare those to what was previously done with the work that was done back in the late 90s.
Okay. And the other,
2000.
I will answer the one question. Within the DEP report, because everyone knows I was heavily involved with this, part of the residential development that was provided, that it was clear to become residential development, it says each house, just to make sure that it's fine, has to have a vapor barrier in there. So it was already put in the writing that had to occur. The other question I have is, I think it's more for the residents. I know the way you guys have been affected in your proximity to the property. I went in and, just to do my research on your houses, and see what was going on. We had talked to Mr. Booth before about somebody had tar bubbling up on their property historically. It was you, right?
One of them.
It was one of you guys?
Four or five of us.
And it was you guys. Okay, so I think you had a test done from what I pulled a record of. The test that you had completed on your property for those oils
1988 by Weston.
by Weston, what was the results of that?
If it was toxic, if it went above a bubbling point, 280 degrees, something like that.
Okay.
As an inert substance being cold, it wasn't dangerous.
So it has to go 280 degrees.
It was above boiling. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
But for the purpose of what they're finding, is that a similar type of substance that you're finding on the property now?
You showed me what you had bubbling on your lawn. I've seen it before.
Right.
And it's kind of what I've called bunker C. I don't know that that's what it is, but it's a real heavy oil that was probably involved in the asphalt production that I understand went on there. So it's probably not a lot different than
what's here or what you're finding on the property?
And it looks like, you know, it might have been layered. Again, this is just kind of looking at the property today. It looks like it might have been layered down. They might have put rock on top of it, trying to build something like asphalt.
So that would be the same type of smell that they're smelling today.
That's part of the smell.
That's part of the smell.
And I think, you know, sitting here and smelling it when it comes on, I don't know how much of the actual smell comes from that little bit of oil that we're seeing.
Right.
And how much of it just comes from all the exposed black peanut butter-like or bunker C or asphalt, whatever it is. That's what I tend to smell more of right now.
Okay.
So.
And all that has to be remediated?
Yeah, they would have to address that.
On our properties? If it's coming from this.
Well, through the corrective action process, they have to characterize it, which they start with the source, where they know the sources, and then they would have to address it.
And above 85 degrees, is that any reason to have some concern?
85 degrees?
Above 85, 90. You get a week at 90, then that little plume comes from a quarter size and goes to
Yeah,
I got them in my
didn't you tell me, one of you gentlemen told me that there was surface impoundments over on your side where your houses are now?
Yeah, there was 10 asphalt tanks back here in the 1930s. You pull back, you pull sand.
Show them the
diagram. You pull
found it last night at the Delaware.
Show you 10 tanks.
Yeah.
Well, they have the Sanborn maps there.
It
Yeah.
was the good road. See, there's the map. It's literally.
Where's your house on there?
I'm not sure. I'm not that good at the map thing, but
So where's the surface impoundments?
It's right at the end of the trestle.
It appears to be around where
Tom's house is.
I'm next to him, so it's south.
So those were probably the rail cars.
No,
No,
says tanks. They were
they're 10
storage
asphalt
tanks.
tanks.
Yeah, 10 asphalt tanks. Hold on. Here, right here. I'll let you.
It's a 1940 map.
Asphalt tank.
From when it was the Good Road Company.
So it would have been right in that area.
So you're saying asphalt tanks, so we don't know if that's above ground, level, or whatever, we don't know.
They were above ground? Oh, no, I can send this to you.
What's this?
That's that regular size, and then I zoomed in.
Yeah,
So
that would be
it's
helpful if
right-
you would send it to all of us. And you've got my email address, right?
Yeah. Rebecca will give you her email address.
You can send that to us.
That way you can send it to us.
I believe Walker Richfield was back in there too. They had
Yeah, and then I guess there was another company, Philadelphia Fuel, and
Yeah, there's an old fuel refinery actually at the other end of this property where they were actually burning coal to extract gasoline and then selling it on Manoa
I'm
Road.
not accusing it of coming from this property.
Okay. Now, are there other questions? Okay, this gentleman has a question.
I have a question about the thoroughness of the remediation process. Once you're done here and the analysis is complete, how assured can we be that you will not be finding other locations in the future on this property? You know, how thorough will you? Can you say you'll be able to
The
be?
regulations require that they meet a standard. They meet an Act 2 standard. The Act 2 standard has to be, it's a protective standard. So through the process, they'll meet an Act 2 standard at the process.
Is that core samples?
What is that?
Well, they have to look at soils. They have to look at water. Is going to be the big medias here that they would look at.
I mean, I would think core samples, because this wasn't discovered until you went down.
Yeah, and as a part of the characterization process, there's a lot of different ways to collect those samples. They can do borings, they can do excavation, with backhoes, and do test pits and collect samples. For the groundwater, the installation of monitoring wells, so they can actually sample the groundwater to see what is in groundwater, whether it's product or it's the dissolved phase.
No, I don't know if you're aware when we're talking about the tar that's coming up through the ground. The tar is also coming up on the other side of Washington Avenue on the bank.
Naylor's Run?
Naylor's Run comes, there's two tributaries that come down, meet behind Mr. Booth's house, and then run this way. But on the bank, there is some tar.
So you see tar actually.
There's actually tar down this
oozing
side.
out of the.
It's on the bank.
Into
yeah.
the.
We haven't been there since they put the signs up, but I took pictures from weeks, a month ago.
Nailers Run?
Yeah, the Nailers Run down there, and I think you're talking about on the other side that we're on, right?
Right, on the other side of Washington Avenue.
Again, that's now you're just wondering what all was here, But is there any reason why you're not allowed to because that's the one disagreement I have with Rich is just in the characterization of the amount of oil that's come up is, before they put the signs on to keep us out, it was significant, black, different than what we saw originally, That was my only disagreement with you.
I'm not sure what it was. What was a disagreement?
No, just about, you kind of characterize it as just bubbling up on the surface, but
Yeah.
the next day, I think that's when I called you, I'm like, Rich, you thought yesterday was bad. You got to see it now because it was really heavy.
Yeah, I did come out, but I know the smell was heavy. I don't
No, but
disagree
just
with
I
that,
meant the
but
look. There was more of it. It spread in the
But
fountain.
again, it's like paper thin layer on top. And if you take not that I'm encouraging you, nor should you go on that
No,
side.
we've not been there.
But if you take a rock and throw it into the water, you'll see it just push, and it spreads apart, and then it comes back. It looks bad. You take a tape measure or something like that, or a stick, and you push it in, and you say, "Oh my goodness, this whole thing's coated with oil."
Yeah.
No, it's not because that's how deep it is. It's because you pushed it through and it coated. Okay.
Okay.
It's.
I'd like to see. We didn't do that when you and I were here, and I'm not doubting. I'm
yeah.
just kind of like, wow.
No,
it's a lot different.
again, it does stink. It stunk very badly. I told you. I'm standing over it for 2 hours. I got a headache, doing it.
Yeah.
All right. Several feet away, 5-10 feet away, it wasn't nearly as bad. But so I don't know that we disagree on it. But maybe
it's just,
we do.
what like Jeff was saying, like in the paper and stuff. We don't want people to not believe what we're saying. It's just, be able to see it and show it to people.
You have a question, I think. Just ask Rich on these tanks. Do the age, Rick?
Pardon?
Do the age frame of these things, the 30s and 40s.
Age, yeah.
Could that be coal tar storage?
I don't know.
Can we test for that? Because isn't that?
We tested the different range of organics, of petroleum range organics. Okay, and I told you what it came back. It came back in a heavy end for lubricating oils and such. We didn't. My recollection, we didn't sample I can't remember if we sampled the peanut butter-like material or not, which is the same stuff that you sampled.
Got a question. For years, this site has always been secured. It's been fenced. Okay. Since the builder came in and started doing construction, the fence has come down, and now we know there's problems here. Shouldn't this site be secured? Shouldn't it be fenced?
You got up to DEP.
And you got hundreds of people going here every day. Kids come from school. They're playing on the equipment. They're walking by the pits. I would think that for the builders, safety and security, it should also be secured.
We'll have that discussion. We'll discuss.
Okay, sure.
Redundant question. The berms of dirt that are there now with the coal tar on top, a little bit of oil, asphalt, that are closest to our properties, and the stuff that's in the pits. Redundant question. Can that be covered, removed, taken off site?
I believe that's. I can't speak for what the property owner is doing, but I know that somewhere it was said that he had contractors looking at doing some removals.
My understanding is that some of the piles are scoped to be removed. I don't know which
the ones that
they
are covered with white.
They recovered.
It's 2 weeks.
The first night they recovered, the kids took it off, and I don't think poly's enough to cover that. You need tarp, something heavy that's not going to blow.
And that's something too that we'll work with them.
Okay.
To try and to have that.
And I would think with the open pit, how hard is it to cover it,
remove it,
put boards, to mitigate the smell?
I don't know that most of the smell is coming from the excavations. I think it's maybe coming from soils just generally.
Then we got a bigger problem than I thought.
The brown soil, is that something that's removed and taken by an Eldridge or like one of the oil recycling places, or how does that work? I know like when we have spills in basements and like.
Yeah, when I had a conversation with my was the LLC. Excuse me.
Is that something that's not treated here? That would be treated at another place?
Not treated at the site.
Walter Payne? Walter Payne. So is he the one that is not involved with this? He was just identified as somebody that oversees like different DEP cleanup sites? Or
He deals with the active program. Susan Kennedy, she is the manager for the corrective action process.
She's my supervisor.
So she's going to be the supervisor. She'll be the manager handling.
Okay. One more. Sure. What's exposed now? If we get a rainstorm, torrential thunderstorm, what's going to happen when they get into the creek, which is another major concern? Any runoff? Because the silt that's there has got breaks throughout. I know they addressed some of the breaks in there, but it's in the water stream. So the funds just clean hours run up, millions of dollars. We're getting wildlife back. But last week there was a fish killing there. I'm not saying it happened from here, but there was dead fish in the creek.
I mean, it's again, like you said, the exposed piles, the product is in the excavation. That's what we would work with that property owner and make sure that it's addressed. So,
is that something that can be expedited? I mean, is that something that we can not be mean to the developer? Again, we're not going after the developer. We don't want to get sick.
Sir, we're here today, and this is something that I've assured the representative. This is a priority for the region.
I don't know. So, hold on, Ted. Did you have a question?
Did they test the stream when they had that fish killed?
The person came out and looked at it. There was 5 fish, some white frothy material that seemed to be really look more like pool shocks, like when you clean your pool. It seemed to be floating on the water, and it was up above any outlets. The old outlets to this site, which is blocked.
To have that, right?
This time, well, the storms. This water accepts water from people washing their cars, pumping water out of their pool into the back.
But would not that show that it was a cleaning chemical that was in the water if you tested it?
We didn't sample it. It didn't rise to the level where we would send somebody out to sample that. By the time we get out there, collect the samples, usually it's gone.
So were there more dead fish down the stream then by the time you guys came out?
There was only 5 fish noted.
So what would have to be the protocol for you to test it? Why is
How many fish would have to be dead before you would come out and worry
about it? We
about
have to
it?
see some evidence of some widespread or unnatural kind of thing. We get fish kills all over the place from people washing their cars or pumping out their pools. You know, and we don't come out and try and run those down every time.
Right, but we don't have big sites like this.
This site wasn't. We didn't see anything. We didn't see any oil on the water where the fish were in. This was just a white frothy material that smelled like clean, like sort of like somebody had shocked their pool and had pumped it out into the back, and it got into the stream. That's what it was reported as to me.
Jeff, did you have any?
It sounds like there's not enough testing going on for all the
Things that are 10,000-page report, just 6 samples that I took. I'm not
and
sure
how many
that's
people
enough.
that have been complaining of having horrible headaches since all these fumes started coming out?
I don't know.
There's something crossing that's causing headaches. It's not just stress related.
No, I'm not saying it's stress related. And I know like I said, I got a headache when I stood next to the excavation.
Right.
But when we moved farther away from the excavation, we didn't have it any longer.
But they don't have the option of moving farther away from it.
When I say moving back, I'm talking 10 or 15 feet. And yes,
But
there's
the
a petroleum.
saying it's
There's a
coming in their house
petroleum.
and they're still getting
Yeah,
headaches.
there's a petroleum odor that comes off the site right now. I can smell it. You know, when the wind shifts this way.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if some people are more susceptible. I happen to be one of those kind of people that I get a headache with nail polish or whatever, you know. So it wouldn't surprise me that some people would get headaches from that. But that's actually not in the scope of what we're doing. What EPA's role here initially was, if there's a chronic kind of issue like you're describing, which I don't doubt that it occurs, that's more into their whole process of how they're going to handle the remediation. And I'm sure that they will deal with the odors and any kind of chronic issues like that.
You mentioned a toxicologist. Is there any part of this? I'm sorry. No, I was going to say, is there a piece of this that is toxicology related, like that determines, you know, obviously it's not Rich isn't one, you know. Is there a toxicology something?
Through the evaluation under our regulations, those were taken into consideration. So, I mean, that's a part of it. I mean, it's part of being addressed. It's part of the human health.
Sorry, Brad. Oh, no, it's kind of the same thing. So my question is, because when we did the testing, everything was below standard, correct?
As far as, yeah.
So all the drilling we did was below standard. At this time, with Mr. Booth's question, is that soil, if it washed away because of because there's nothing found in it, would it be contaminating the water that the nailers run? In other words, it was so minimal, it's ready to be used, from what I understood, for housing. So if it did rain, and from all the testing we did, it said it's below standard, would that cause a problem to kill fish?
Well, the sampling that you did on the property, based on the information we have, it's hard to really pinpoint exactly where all the sampling took place, as far as where that was identified.
Okay.
I mean, that's
Jeff,
where,
do you remember how far south you did it?
You know what?
I'm sorry.
There was, and Hill can concur with this, there was sampling done when they did the original remediation. Then there was sampling that I did, and from what I was told, because I got heavily involved after I saw that nice article, I started calling back the people that did our environmental, because I wanted to find out what the heck was going on. And what they simply said, and correct me if I'm wrong, you could drill where you're at, and a lot of this ground is, it's contained and tight, as they said. So you could drill right where you're at, you wouldn't find anything. You could drill over here, and you might find something. So part of what was in the is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So whether we drilled in the exact pinpoint, I would have never known. So the answer is that and part of the phase 2 was if we encountered anything further, which was all given to the new owner, that it would be taken care of. But from what I'm understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, all the sampling right now still shows below. So even the sampling that they've done. But my question is
I wouldn't say that the sampling that we did shows it's below. We found oil, which wouldn't be acceptable under the Act 2 program.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
My scope of my investigation or response was to see if there was an immediate or imminent threat to human health and the environment. That doesn't mean chronic things. That means an immediate kind of.
So that goes back to my question then. So if the water did run off, would it be diluted enough not to kill fish? That's what I'm asking. Like, I don't want the streams.
It would have to, I don't know how much it would have to rain to fill up those excavations to get them to the point to overflow. They're down about 5-6 feet right now. Okay.
Yeah, that's deep. Okay.
So you'd have to have. I don't know.
I know.
Hurricane type, maybe more than a hurricane to get it to get.
Okay, so we need Floyd back.
I don't think so.
Not for Floyd or Sandy.
Okay, I got you a question.
Back to where Jeff's at, with the footings that are there, there's also an 18-inch drain that goes back to the creek. Now, you close it up. Is it closed?
I didn't close it off.
It's not. Well, the builder closed, yes. Is there any reason to believe that that's underneath it is a chase way to get back to the creek? Or should that be?
Anything like that? No.
I mean, I don't see anything at the other end. Sticking my nose in.
I don't see any direct path. If there was, that would have been something would have immediately have addressed.
So maybe when we get the next big rain, which we're supposed to be getting this weekend or something, could they check the water and see if there's a runoff from the land? Havertown has a huge runoff of water, especially, I mean, you're talking about the end of a huge street down here that's going to flood right into here.
And we're going to talk more with the builder about doing something with what's in there now. Because we had talked about some material they call, these absorbent pads and stuff. But as far as an immediate thing, like I'm saying, it's 5 feet. It's at least 5 feet, and there's a huge amount of area that would be. I'm not going to say biblical proportions. It would have to be a huge,
I don't know.
huge amount of rain.
The builder doesn't want us going back to look at it, so I don't know what it looks like back here. I just know
I don't think that. My understanding is that there's a concern about safety issues and other things. I don't know why the builder doesn't want you back there, but this says it's a construction activity. Okay, so.
But the neighbors say the kids are back there all the time playing, all the time. Little kids playing on that.
Then the neighbor should call the police and ask them to remove the kids.
Or it should be fenced off.
Or maybe it should be fenced off, but I've seen
it's a safety issue, and it's a known safety issue.
Timeline to say that this is going to be fixed right away. It should be fenced off so kids can't get in. Because honestly, my kids are older; they're not playing down there. But why should we have to police everybody else's children when it's not our property? If it's somebody's property, it's contaminated. They should fence it off so the kids can't get in there until we know what's going on. That's not like a major issue for us as neighbors to ask. That would be great.
Hey, Greg, is the property, is there a member of the LLC here? I know I asked earlier, you told me to hold off. The LLC that owns this, is there a member of that LLC here today? No.
So they're showing a great concern for the community.
Why they're not here? Were they not aware of the meeting?
I'm actually a consultant to
I understand.
But you're not an owner.
but I'm not an owner.
You're not a member of the LLC. I asked that before. I think that's interesting, that, Greg, if they knew you were having this meeting with the
In all fairness, when I set it up, it was, as I said in the beginning, it was going to be a sort of a small meeting with Mr. Rupert to kind of update me and have some of the residents' questions answered. We did not ask.
Well, I mean, we have the former owner here, and thanks, Jeff, for coming down. But I mean, it seems to be of significant concern to the 30 or so odd people that are here, mostly residents, as well as the feds and the state. You think a member of the LLC would be here?
I understand your point, but again, I have to take responsibility for not asking them to come. That wasn't really the nature of the meeting.
But you would think if they were interested in developing this in a safe manner, that they would be here today to address these concerns.
I understand your
But I'm
point.
pretty sure, Tom, that they're all for following the Act too. I mean, I'm living here. He was planning on living here.
Jeff, you live as close to this as I do.
I know. I'm right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've all known about the property. Growing up as a kid, we all played here. I think even Mr. Vitali.
45 years ago, I remember that trestle. Yeah.
I could hear bottles. So, but I mean, the other thing is, guys, in all reality, everybody's saying, oh, everybody's on there. Guys, even with us, it's private property. So we really need permission to go on anyway. With our kids playing on, my kids live right here. I tell them not to go on.
My kids don't go on. I don't. I'm a couple streets back.
I'm not
Other
kidding. You
kids
can
are
chase
on
them out,
all
but
the
it's
time.
like it's private property. So like, Lois, did you have permission to go on to do the article? I mean, these are things that we look at.
That was before. Okay, since then we've all stayed off.
But I mean, just stay off of it. So because we know it's a problem. You know what I mean?
Let's just keep it to the question and answer format. Then when all the questions are answered, then we'll sort of informally have discussions among ourselves. Okay, so let's.
I don't want anybody getting hurt.
No. So I know you don't. Anybody else have any public questions or comments for the experts, or okay, go ahead,
There was
Mr.
supposed to be a test drill that day.
I called the county office the other day to protest the situation. The lady there just said the project has been approved, and she hung up on me. I think she didn't even give me a chance to go on and explain the reason for my protest. Number two, just this morning, I live in one of these homes over there. Just this morning, I asked my wife to compile a list of people. We've been here since about 50 years. The people that have passed on since then. And there's a number of them. Whatever the cause was, I don't have any idea.
There's a list of people who died of cancer.
Oh,
in every
okay,
house.
okay. I'd like to have that. I'll make a copy of it.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Right. And right, and that when I talked to that lady over there, and she said the project has been approved, and hung up on me. I felt like I deserved more of an explanation or better telephone etiquette.
Well, you have unanswered questions. You can always use my office as a conduit to get to the right person, and we can maybe be a little more persistent in answering your questions.
I think she should have been a little more informed that the project has been canceled. And I also put at the bottom of my note, I guess I was a little bit obnoxious. I said, have you seen the article in the Delaware County News? If not, you should see it, which I have here. That was the note. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me.
My pleasure. Questions, comments before we kind of break up into private conversation?
I just have a summary. I think it would benefit everyone here. I think it's still a little confusing about what the EPA found, because you're referring to contamination. You're saying there's no problem.
No. Let me just give a very quick overview. Okay. EPA and this has a broad coverage of all environmental regs and statutes, right? And through that, they gradually have passed them down or implemented. The state's taking implementation, right? The state now pretty much handles almost all the environmental programs, with some federal involvement. Now, when there's an emergency,
Right.
and that's how this came to us, was through something over the National Response Center. It's an emergency number. That's how we first got involved. So I come out and I look at it, and under an authority called Superfund, you've all heard of that, to decide whether there's imminent, substantial, and danger to the human health or the environment. Come out, look at it, and assess it, and say there's no imminent type of danger. Okay, that doesn't address chronic, long-term things.
What exactly did you find though? Because
we found oil.
And don't do a lot of acronyms.
We found oil. We found diesel fuel, weathered old diesel fuel, and lubricating oil.
Weathered old diesel fuel and lubricating oil.
Yeah, that's what the analysis. That's how.
And
they
it wasn't a
characterize
6 foot. What was it? What was the area that you tested?
There's a couple excavations in there, footings, probably 10 by 4. Okay, roughly, and 10 foot by 4 foot, and they're several feet deep. And there's about a foot of water, maybe 60 inches.
They dug a hole, basically.
And there's oil on top of that. It's the thickness of about a piece of paper. A sheen, I wouldn't even call it, it's thicker than a sheen. There's oil floating on top of the water. It's probably no thicker than at the most the cardboard on your pad. We sampled that, and that's what came back as being oil, diesel fuel or lubricating oil, highly weathered. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Do I understand that they're still being the wells are still being monitored?
Which
from the situation from over on Eagle Road, the wood pressure
pressure treater,
yes, sir.
pentachlorophenol, which PCP.
Okay, understand that's still being monitored.
I'm not sure. I'm not involved in that project.
Well water or something like that.
Probably is, but I'm not. Like I said, I'm not involved in it, so I really can't answer that. But I was concerned about that when I took these samples. So that was one of the chemicals that I looked for. That was one of my highest concerns, because that will cause cancer. It's well known, right?
Saying PCP, not the PCB or PCP.
PCP, Peter, Charlie, Peter.
Maybe if they could look at the list that this lovely gentleman gave you about people who had died recently.
We can pass it on.
They could have a look and tell them if possibly any of these chemicals were causes of the cancers that
well,
they had.
good question.
Or leukemias.
Well put.
Yeah, I could. Although I'm not a
I think it
toxicologist,
might make them feel a little more comfortable.
I'll be glad to pass it on to the person. His name is Josh Barber. He's the remedial project manager for that site. Okay, and I'll go beyond that a little bit. Having worked in this field for a really long time, it's really almost impossible to say a cancer is caused by a certain chemical. It's almost impossible to do that. We'll pass it on. They'll look at it. We work closely with part of
They
CD.
are able to tell you if you frequently work with certain chemicals that they do cause cancers, leukemias.
If you frequently work with them. Some chemicals are associated, like benzenes have a
They
certain,
can tell you that kind of information.
but not generally, no. They can say there's a relation. Anyway, I'll let a health professional tell you, because I'm going to use the wrong words or something. But if you give me the list, do you want to make a copy of it? Or
I think this was some of it.
So were those chemicals found, the same type of chemical found on this property?
Absolutely not.
So there was not.
There was no pentachlorophenol found in the oil that we sampled here.
Okay. Because I thought before it came up clean, so I'm just making sure for that specific, because I was concerned about it as well. So you found the same. Okay.
The last thing I was going to say is, like, back when we went to the meetings, and Jeff was great. Gene, just the list of people. Argo Heekin. You know, the other thing was just how close the homes are going to be, like, not only for us, like, I mean, they're very, it's the 25 feet or whatever it is, and they're pretty good sized homes, and if I'm those fires, I don't want to be that close to us either. Like, I don't know if that has any reason why they're so close. Like, are they trying to stay away from this stuff, or?
Oh, no, let's do this. Mr. Rupert, just want to.
What's that?
I think what we'll do, like, very quickly, is break into these private conversations, if that's where it seems to be heading. But
I think we should find out if he found anything. If he could say generally whether he found anything that's. Could you tell us?
I found oil. It's not an immediate threat. Act 2, the state looks at it from a longer period of time, constant exposure, like if they were going to build on it, and they will determine, they have their toxicologists, they have all these various evaluations they go through to find out I hate to use the word safe, what's acceptable and what's not. And maybe you want to talk about that.
When you refer to contamination, what are you saying?
Well, contamination.
Removing contamination, what are you saying?
Well, contamination is what they found in the ground.
Okay, and that is?
Oil is considered contamination. It's a contaminant. So through the processes that we have with our regulations, they would have to identify the extent of that contamination, and then they would have to basically meet a standard, which that standard, which Mr. Rupert is saying is the standard that says that it's safe for human health. That meets a standard.
Right, we're at the point now that we know that there's some contamination. Moving forward, we're looking at long-term effects, but we don't know them yet, and yet the project is going to continue. So what's the timeline for us to have the information about the long-term effects for people that live here? Even though it's minimal exposure, it's still, something that we're concerned about, especially with young kids and pregnant people and people that are more susceptible. We have sick kids around here that already have, immune issues, and then we have stuff that's airborne. That we want to know what your standards are and what the timeline is and how that's going to affect this project.
The way we work with the responsible parties or the property owners in this case is there's the characterization process. They have 180 days from the time that they identify the contamination, which was the uncovering of the contamination, to do the characterization. After that point, they would look at what remedial actions they'll take. That would be long term. They have 90 days to figure that out. And then at that point, you get into what we call the attainment phase, where you do your remediation, which could be the long-term remediations, and you look at what the concentrations are moving forward to meet the standards. And what happens is, meeting a standard isn't you take one sample and you meet a standard. You need a minimum of 8 quarters, which is 2 years worth of sampling for water, to be able to establish, what kind of trends you have in that water and whether there are problems.
I'm going to ask you very quickly, because the DEP paperwork that I had when I had this property, okay, clearly stated and identified everything that you're saying, that there's test wells, there was 12 test wells across the property, and you did test it for a period of 2 years, and then you received a letter, and then there's a letter in file saying that this property can be used for residential, provided that there's a vapor barrier, correct?
The letter that I have states that standards were met.
Standards were met.
And that it does say that if, at any time in the future, whether there was building, if anything was found at that time, that it would be addressed through the process.
So this is part of that, correct?
Correct.
And so right now, this is status quo for what you've written previously. This is everything that was dictated in that.
Right. This is all right. This stuff was done originally, but now that additional information has surfaced, the process begins again. So let's go through the process again. But like I was saying, the attainment stage takes time because you have to be able to demonstrate that you meet the standard. I can back all the way back up to the beginning. We have something called interim remedial actions. The interim remedial actions means we do things right up front, and that's where you look at removing the product. You look at the soils, covering the soils, removing the soils from the property. You deal with the immediate concern at the time, and then you move through. It's a stepwise process. That's why I said our regulations have a very good stepwise process, for the property owner and his consultant to move through to be able to address this.
And also, ma'am, as we move through this process, as I mentioned earlier, we'll coordinate through the representative's office for another meeting, and again, answer any questions, give you the information that we have at that point as we continue to work on this site. So we'll organize that. Any question you have, we'll make sure that we get answered.
Mr. Vitali, is the township aware of this meeting, and did they send a representative?
They are aware, and they declined to attend. Lori Hanlon did not want to attend a meeting where media was present.
Who didn't want to?
Lori Widow.
Zoning
officer. Manager.
I don't know your name, I'm sorry, but you had mentioned there's a 10,000-page report based on 6 tests that you did.
There's a 10,044-page analytical report.
Where is that available?
It's not available right now. There is a website It does have the one initial report of our response out here.
Okay.
I'm not sure the best way, if you give me your card, I will, actually I think Lois, I gave you the, are you going to write a story? Maybe you could post, and I'll give it to you too. You
We're
got
both reporters.
Yeah. There's a link. Check out their stories, and there's a link that eventually will be released.
The report.
Yeah. You're not going to look at the report. I've been doing this for a long time. I look at the report and I'm like, my head
I personally
explodes.
look at it, but I have other people that are way more
But they'll be-
knowledgeable than I am that I would like to send it to.
Yeah, that's fine. It'll be there. It will also be there at some time in the next couple weeks. The information will be harvested and put into something that normal people like you and I can read and look at it. The analytical report's got all these graphs from the instruments that they used, and it's worse than a Russian novel, okay?
I actually have some adjustments, so if you email me, I can fill it.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's all right.
Before we break into one-on-one conversations, were there any more public questions that we have?
Well, just to be clear, so the point of contact for moving forward is DEP, is that correct? So, and you are...
I'm the project officer on this.
And your name again is?
Rebecca Flannery.
Okay, great.
You guys are ready to head out with your information?
And if you forget her name or have other questions, my office,
They have my number.
we work with the DEP, both being state entities, and
And again, as we have more information, we'll coordinate a follow-up meeting as we're going through this process to make sure.
Greg, do you have any idea why Ms. Widup wouldn't come here because of media being here? I thought they didn't know media was in this.
I think we have to ask her.
She's not, since this property was announced, she's not been very open to anything.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Other public questions before we? Okay. Listen.
Too late.
Thank
I know
you.
you asked a lot of questions, so I'll give you my card. Thanks. So if you have questions, you can
Because there's
email
records
me.
of this being an issue way back.
Yeah, we saw some of the
Let's do
history.
this.
and
Let's
that
just
picture
sort
will
of.
help us a lot.
We're going to be here. I'm going to be here. Let's just sort of just interact with the people you want to interact with right now, and ask the questions to the people you want to interact with, and feel free to call my.